Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It feels so good to be back in the command center at the seat that can cushion my body appropriately. Let's get into what is going on right here. I decided that, and apologies in advance for not having a video up at the regularly scheduled time. I went more than 24 hours without a video, which is a cardinal sin. I apologize to the Marvel Future Fight gods, to the Marvel Future Fighters, to Jonathan, but I just wanted to, update you guys. It wasn't that I didn't have any content or I was scrambling to do anything. I was just trapped, and I was basically on like a really bizarre adventure, across the continental United States over back into my homeland of Canada. So, with that being said, I'm going to be slamming you guys, everybody out there actually, with as much content as you can handle and all of the best content that you enjoy, including some stuff that I don't generally like to do as much, but you guys deserve it for, being so patient. So if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. So here we go. This is the top 30 meta snapshot for update 5.4. Technically, this is my version for update 5.4.5. And what I mean by that is we know that there are, and if you're not caught up with it, there are going to be 2 more uniforms introduced sometime in the near future for Namor and for Magic. They were confirmed via live stream when the APK was first given out to Star Agents. The data mined images of their icons are in the game already. So we absolutely know that they are coming. So what I thought I would do is I would basically just speculate on Namor specifically. Now, while I don't have Magic on this list at all. I haven't speculated on her, and I haven't speculated on Namor anywhere else in any of my guides or any of my lists. I think it would be interesting to do it for the meta snapshot because unlike Magic, Namor, we already know he's very, very strong. We already know what he can do, and so just imagining him that much stronger, a little bit stronger with that uniform, even if the uniform provides very low buffs, a character's first uniform is often the most pivotal, the most important, because it really takes them up to a whole new level. And you can think of someone like Deadpool, who was already very strong without his uniform, but then his uniform offered him that much more protection, that much more viability in PvP. He's basically still as good in PvE, but that extra chunk for PvP is really what made his uniform, that difference maker and actually pushed him further and closer into the meta. So that's kind of a good example of what I think could happen to Namor, and it's just fun to speculate on that. But besides Namor being here and being over here, every other character has already been introduced to the game. It's already in the game. We've already had time to play with them, and I've already had time to observe who's using them, why they're using them, how effective they are. And so this is the PvE and PvP top 30 snapshot. Just as a PSA before we get really into the nitty-gritty of why I moved characters up or down, keep in mind this is just my rough assessment of who I think is the most popular characters to use for different game modes, and why I think that they deserve to be here is basically because they can compete at the top level and because people are using them with all sorts of builds and having success. While certain builds might be preferable, certain CTPs or certain ISO 8 sets or certain card sets, sure, but these characters, even with below average setups, will, be here or very, very close to their spot. Nobody gets knocked way out of the list if you kind of swap around their setup a little bit, at least in my opinion. But these are just my opinions. Feel free to disagree with me, but let's jump into it. So the PvE, I feel like since the Namor update and since the recent Phoenix 3 update, hasn't really changed much. I think that is one reason why some people might feel as though there hasn't been any really spicy, really exciting characters in the game, because PvE, I think, is the barometer that most people use, and it hasn't shifted that much. I've internally shifted my list. That's why all these bolded names are here. Bolded means they've moved up or down, but I think that has more to do with Galactus settling down as, a viable option for testing a character's strength in Giant Boss Raid. And then the fact that we've gotten game modes, a game mode in Danger Room that doesn't actually impact the meta snapshot. The Danger Room, I'm not including in this list because they're preset characters and they're all tier 3s to the best of my knowledge. Thus far, I haven't seen the new season's characters, but because you're playing with preset characters, I don't think their value is going to shift. And it's not like their value is being considered for Giant Boss or so for Danger Room. It's just that they are tier 3, so Netmarble throws them into Danger Room. Because if it was about value, Black Panther and Ant-Man would never be in Danger Room. Let's get that out of the way. So I put Namor up, I believe, 1 or 2 spots from his original spot last time I did a snapshot. Or actually, I don't think I had him on this list. I'm not sure. But I think he's going to settle in right around Jean Grey and Captain Marvel's territory. But he may go higher, because if he's going to be getting a uniform to make him a villain, he's going to become a very versatile character, able to do potentially every single world boss except Cull Obsidian, because he's got physical damage for Proxima. He's got the elemental damage for Ebony, and we'll have to see how that works out. Because even though it's elemental damage, physical damage characters can't go nearly as high as energy elemental characters, but Ghost Panther and Thing can still do their work. And then obviously still amazing against Thanos and able to do Corvus, because everyone can do Corvus. He's the lowest barometer possible. But then the ABX, that's the big one. He'll be able to do combat hero and combat villain, which is something we haven't seen ever. Actually, we haven't seen a character that can actually do both competently at any high level at all. Like we just don't get combat heroes being turned into combat villains. It just doesn't happen. And if it happens, they're not good as combat heroes. They're only good as villains, or vice versa. Speaking of Venom and anti-Venom, stuff like that. So he is poised to possibly crack the top 5 and be a very strong character. But we'll have to see how it goes. But he's extremely strong as it is now. I think I moved Iron Man up 1 spot. I just think his value in GBR is not to be kind of ignored, and I do think that he's a solid pick all around. Although he is more dependent on the build than other characters on this list, he is very, very strong. Same thing goes for Thanos. Super tanky, super safe, one of the safest tier 3s in the game for most content, right there with Jean Grey, especially if you build him for PvE. He's got the healing, he's got the damage reduction, and then he's also got, dodge for the rage, so it's just impossible for you to die unless you make, like 20 mistakes in a row. I moved Psylocke down to accommodate these characters. I also moved Mr. Fantastic, I believe, up because he does, very well in most content, and he can hit a lot harder now with his uniform. Scarlet Witch obviously had to move down. Cyclops tier 3 is the only other new, I guess, no, also Silver Surfer. But he's the new tier 3 on the block. I put him here because I'm not terribly impressed with what I've seen. And for those of you wondering what I've seen, I saw a 7-minute giant boss raid clear of Galactus, basically a solo carry. So at tier 3, it takes him 7 minutes to solo carry. That's a pretty long time with Ancient One and Shuri's support. So that tells me that his damage is definitely not up there with Sharon Rogers, which is where we were kind of thinking he might be based on the strength of his tier 3 skill. But on top of that, his other skills don't do nearly as much damage as Sharon Rogers' 1 through 5, and he doesn't have the kind of buffs that she has, which we're kind of all hoping that he gets kind of tweaked because he deserves to be stronger. But yeah, I think this should be a really good indication for Netmarble. Putting him at 14th, putting him under characters that have been in the game with a uniform for over a year should let you know that Netmarble needs to make him stronger. He's not punching up with these cats. He's definitely not in this category. Maybe Psylocke is the only one where some people could say, tier 3 Cyclops is better than Psylocke. Yeah, he might be better than her for certain situations, for certain content, but he's tier 3. So that comparison becomes really unfair, and imagine a Psylocke at tier 3 without even getting a tier 3 skill. Just the stat bonus might make her automatically better than Cyclops because she already hits like an absolute truck. Although she is a little bit more limited in the content that she can do compared to Cyclops. And then Silver Surfer comes in at number 15, just a solid character, although he can only really do World Boss and Shadowland. ABX is not really his forte at all. And then GBR, again, not really good. He can do it, but it's not very impressive, even with a CTP of Rage. It just he doesn't put up those numbers that you expect. He doesn't put the numbers up that the characters around him put up. Perhaps maybe Scarlet Witch and Gambit, but considering his cost, considering he's a native tier 2 like Scarlet, that has to be considered as well. And then Thor, I moved him up because he's basically the second best universal hero at tier 3. He's probably not as good as Silver Surfer for some content, but he is better for other content like ABX, like Giant Boss Raid. So Thor still has his value. Again, a little bit more dependent on the build. And then Doctor Doom I moved down. Minerva I moved way down because the combat villain class is getting really full now with Colossus and then Namor coming in. I also moved Victorious down because of the universal villains. And then Emma Frost, I moved up a little bit because I'm sure she's going to get a little bit stronger. I've seen her in a little bit more content, a little bit more world boss stuff, but not too impressed with what I've seen, so she's not moving up further. And then other choices here, these are not really having to do with them being in the meta or being used more that I've seen, but I just personally feel like I think I undervalued Quicksilver a little bit. I think I overvalued Ronan a little bit, so I think that this kind of maps out the bottom of the list quite well, although to be honest, the bottom of the list is not as important as other content. You could honestly swap Molten Man and Ronan here, just because Molten Man is better for ABX, but then everything else he kind of, you know, he needs a very specific build, and he needs very good circumstances in order to do these things well. And then I just threw Kid Omega there at level 70 for the 30th spot, although I haven't seen any impressive level 70 Kid Omegas. He was really good at level 60. But yeah, if you have any content for level 70 Kid Omega that he's done, any smashing content, let me know. Or if you think that someone else deserves to be here, hit me up on that too. We can obviously change it. We can hotfix this. As far as PvP goes, much less has changed. And to say that not a lot has changed in PvE is very true. You know, these changes here are all my own changes. So really, you're looking at like 5 changes. 5 characters shifted out of 30. Which is very, very low. And this is over the course of 2 updates. Netmarble has not really been tinkering, tampering, or tweaking, or shaking up the meta in a big way, which you can see as both good and bad. It's not necessarily a bad thing because it allows players to catch up, and it doesn't, you know, make the game feel so, you know, chaotic with everything constantly changing and the carrot constantly being, you know, moved further and further away on that elusive stick. As far as PvP goes, I did inject Silver Surfer up to the top 3. He's seeing a lot of play in basically every PvP game mode, and he is showing promise in every single PvP game mode. And he's pretty much a hard counter one-on-one to Captain Marvel. There's nothing she can do. I've never died to a Captain Marvel with my Silver Surfer even once, let alone twice, which is another big pull for him. Colossus also vaults up from like 27 to 5 because he's everywhere now in Timeline Battle, and he's also seeing heavy rotation in Alliance Tournament, and he is getting mad wins. So, you know, you got to give it up. The big tin can is coming for everybody. Strife had to move down to accommodate these. I'm not really sure what to do with Strife because I'm really not seeing him much anymore, but Strife is still very good, just straight up. He can shut down characters like Thanos with the healing because of his fracture, and he, you know, basically crushes characters with lower HP because he just shreds through them with penetration. He has tons of hits. He has that incapacitation. He applies fear even if you have a debuff leadership. Very, very strong character still, but he's just not being used as much because the top is just so top heavy for PvP. And then I moved everybody else down to kind of accommodate that. I moved Nick Fury up a couple of spots because he's just still seeing a lot of play. He's still being used to counter Thanos because of his passive, and then you can combine that with the leadership to go even further and go even harder. And Nick Fury is not going to lose his value because with Colossus coming in, that's another villain, and then with Namor coming in soon, and possibly Magic if she's very strong, those are even more villains. So the more villains that they add, the stronger it makes Colossus and Nick Fury, but especially Nick Fury, because you combine that 50% leadership with the 55% passive, and you're basically chef's kissing, one-shotting villains, you know, in pretty much any game mode besides the tournament, with any hero that you use behind Nick Fury. And he's a good stall with his long iframe 4th skill. Then we injected Namor here at number 14. Again, I have no idea. This is just pure conjecture, pure speculation. Let me know what you think. I believe if they are not changing his uniform passive from the APK, it is an HP shield that triggers with a 35% chance when he gets hit. And it's got like a 10-second cooldown, and it gives him like 20 or 30% of his HP. That could be, I mean, it sounds bad. HP shields that trigger when you get hit sound really bad, but it could be really good because he has tons of base HP. You know, he's a combat type with lots of stats. And then just imagine how much harder it would be to kill someone like Captain America if he had a reviving shield, if that stacks with the CTP of regen. Who knows? Namor could be a nightmare. We also moved up Quicksilver a couple spots here. I think, again, I was undervaluing him a little bit. He still has value, although he does get hard countered by characters like Thanos because he just cannot kill them. He can also die to reflect from Colossus, but besides that, he still has striking power to kill Jean Greys, to kill other characters as long as he doesn't get one-shotted in between. I moved Scarlet Witch down. I think she's just kind of, you know, not as good. I moved Wasp way down because, again, she's just not seeing rotation as much. You need 3 killers nowadays for most content in PvP, so carrying Wasp, who basically does no damage and can't survive, and basically even if you stall, you're going to lose from having less HP than the opponent, basically means that Wasp is off the table for most content. She's seen on some fringe Alliance tournament teams when lots of top characters are banned, like both Jean Grey and Thanos and Doctor Strange, but that is like once a month at best, so it really doesn't necessitate her being much higher than here, although she's still obviously super useful. I think more likely she's useful for Conquest at this point because of her defensive capabilities, because you can stall. And then we have Emma Frost coming in as a new addition, well, a higher addition. She was here, but she goes up higher because I think her uniform is going to make her better for PvP. Not a lot better because she loses that persistent clone, but she has other weapons now available to her to make up for that, and she's just like a solid sort of second tier character along the lines of Scarlet Witch and these types of characters. The rest of the list is pretty much just untouched. Again, PvP doesn't shift much. We had to drop Magneto, we had to drop someone else, but yeah, you could definitely argue for other characters over here. These are just my take, but let me know what you guys think. So hit me up with your opinions and your ideas for my meta snapshot. What do you think of it? What would you change, and what do you like? Subscribe if you enjoy the content and you want to support me, and of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you later today. Spicy stuff's coming. Take care.